Okay, it's about 5 after. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening. My name is Eva Roclin, and I work in exhibitions and programs at the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History. And we are delighted to be hosting this second of several events from the MexiCali Biennial. Tonight's program is a virtual panel discussion on the Borderlands Research Initiative project. And so we're very excited to be hearing from all sorts of wonderful folks who will be adding context and a lot of really wonderful information for not just the exhibition, but all of the themes and content the exhibition explores. So enough from me. I'm going to go ahead and pass it along, but just so you know, you can still catch this exhibition. It'll be on view at the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History downtown through the end of February. So I'm going to go ahead and through the end of December. My bad. I'm going to go ahead and post information about the exhibition in the chat. So if you'd like to go ahead and link and scroll through some of those events, we'll have that available for you. And I'll go ahead and now pass it along. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, Everett. And on behalf of the MexiCali Biennial, I want to thank Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History for hosting us today. I also want to thank and just kind of pay recognition to California Humanities, which is a nonprofit partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Mellon Foundation, who made today's virtual event possible. So today's event is a panel that's part of the MexiCali Biennial's current program, which is called The Land of Milk and Honey. And as Everett said, it's currently on view at the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History. But before we get the program started, I'd like to just say a couple of words about the MexiCali Biennial, which is an artist-run contemporary arts and culture organization that focuses on the region between California and Baja California as a site of aesthetic production. It was founded in 2006 by artists Ed Gomez and Luis Hernandez. And since then, it's organized large-scale art programs and exhibitions in museums, cultural centers, alternative art galleries, and community serving spaces in Los Angeles, Calexico, Mexicali, Tijuana, and now Santa Cruz. So the organization also commissions artworks that activate the physical border space in the cities of Calexico and Mexicali. But it's also very migratory in nature. So unlike traditional biennials that operate at a fixed site and on a really firm 2-year schedule, the MexiCali Biennial exhibitions and the programs can occur at any time and at any location. And so the current exhibition is titled The Land of Milk and Honey. It'll be coming down from the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History at the end of December. But the next part of the program will inaugurate at the San Bernardino County Museum with a very special exhibition by the artist Fred Brashear, which is scheduled to open on February 4th. And that exhibition will be followed by shows at the Cheech Marin Center for Chicano Art and Culture in Riverside on February 25th, as well as Best Practice in San Diego, and a transnational border program, which will be hosted at the Stepling Gallery at San Diego State University Calexico campus, as well as Planta Libre Independent Gallery in the city of Mexicali. So today's panel is the launch of the Borderlands Research Initiative, which is a research partnership between the MexiCali Biennial and the Hispanic Reading Room at the Library of Congress. And it's aimed at generating new digital research projects about the art, the history, and the cultures of the U.S. Mexico border, as well as its expansive reach beyond the physical site to Alta and Baja California. This initiative began in 2020 when the MexiCali Biennial was invited by the Library of Congress librarians to engage with the vast collections that are related to Latin American, Latinx, and diasporic arts. And the library is the nation's primary access point for research that's related to the Caribbean, Latin America, Spain, and Portugal, as well as the indigenous cultures of those areas, and the people throughout the world that have historically been influenced by Luso-Hispanic heritage, including the Latino and Latinx community in the United States. And so under the guidance of the Hispanic Reading Room librarians, the biennial has been working to contextualize its exhibition programs and participating artist works within the broader art historical canon of American, Latin American, and Latinx art, but also to draw attention to the binational artist communities of Alta and Baja California. And doing so, we're really aiming to generate digital publications, projects that forge collaborations and connections between researchers, artists, historians, and curators on both sides of the border. So the joint research initiative will culminate in a series of 3 Borderlands-related projects. The first project is a series of research guides that connect past and present biennial concepts and themes, as well as major issues in the studies of the borderlands, to the library's historical reservoir of published knowledge. So there are currently 2 guides. One guide is focused on the history of the U.S. Mexico border art, but it uses MexiCali Biennial exhibition concepts as a framework for reflecting on current debates and future directions in the field of border art. So we really aimed to interrogate canonical definitions and studies of border art by elaborating on colonial mythologies of California. So we did that through featuring artworks that were in the Calafia exhibition in 2018 to 2020, issues around cultural cannibalism. That was kind of done through engagement with artworks that were part of the exhibition that was titled Cannibalism in the New World, as well as looking at the border as a ready-made art objects that artists could kind of work and engage with. And that was through the first exhibition that the biennial organized in 2006, as well as issues around the proliferation of global biennials. And so we did that through thinking about the concept of the anti-biennial on the border. And that was really central to the 2009-2010 MexiCali Biennial exhibition. So I invite you to click on the link that's in the chat for direct access to the site. The first research guide, this was collaboratively written by Ed Gomez and Luis Hernandez, as well as April Lillard Gomez, who's a program manager and an independent curator, and myself. And so on behalf of our writing team, I also just really want to give a special thanks to April, who lent her keen eye to the project and really diligently did research through countless Library of Congress databases to find the vast majority of the sources that you see in the guide. We also worked with the research assistant, Alexandra Claire Dean, who was a Pomona College senior majoring in art history, and she really lent her time and persistent effort to the project. And we worked directly with Library of Congress curators and editors, Suzanne Schadl and Catalina Gomez, as well as Maria Daniela Thurber. So I want to thank them and very excited to hear from them in a couple of minutes. But then we also published a second guide that was on the geographies, the boundaries, and the imaginations of space, as well as the histories, the belief systems, landscapes that characterize the U.S. Mexico border. And so this guide was co-authored by Emanuel Ortega Rodriguez, who's an assistant professor in Art of the Spanish Americas at the University of Illinois, Chicago, Heather Williams, who is a professor of politics at Pomona College, and William Cowan, who's a postdoctoral researcher at the USC Huntington Early Modern Studies Institute, and who's joining us today, who we're going to hear about this guide from, as well as Enid Baxter Rice, an artist and a professor of cinematic arts at Cal State Monterey Bay. And they worked collaboratively with Library of Congress editors, Maria Daniela Thurber, as well as Suzanne Schadl, who's here with us today. Now, the second project of the Borderlands Research Initiative will be a story map that's based on The Land of Milk and Honey, which is the upcoming biennial exhibition. And so we're going to use digital storytelling technology to contextualize the history of specific artworks that are featured in the exhibition, and also drawing connections between contemporary art and the archival sources that are in the Library of Congress collection. And so that is an ongoing project, and we're kind of working to get that out in 2023. But the third project is a collaboration between the biennial as well as library curators to enlist poets and writers from the U.S. Mexico border region to record special readings of their works. And these recordings will enter the Palabra Archive, which is a collection of original audio recordings of 20th and 20th century Hispanic poets and writers. And so that is also kind of a project that we will be working on in 2023. So I'd like now to introduce our panelists who are going to be speaking directly about the research collaboration and their work on the project. And so we're joined today by the director of the Hispanic Reading Room, Suzanne Schadl, as well as curator, Catalina Gomez. And we're also joined by two of the co-authors of the Borderlands Research Guides, Will Cowan and Alejandro Espinoza, who are going to be speaking about their work on the Borderlands Research Guides. And then we'll have some short concluding remarks that will be given by Samuel White, who's the current research assistant for the MexiCali Biennial and working directly on the Land of Milk and Honey story map. So without further ado, Suzanne, I will,
Great. Thank you so much, Rosalía. And thank you to everyone in the Borderlands Research Initiative. I'm Suzanne Schadl, and I am the chief of a division in the library called the Latin American, Caribbean, and European Division. It includes two reading rooms, one of them the Hispanic Reading Room. And the Hispanic Reading Room has had a very long history of working with creators, whether those creators are writers or artists or researchers, to bring to light the millions of materials that are in the library and the millions more that really lend to what is brought to light in those materials. So this collaboration is, I think, an interesting move from what we've done previously with something called the Handbook of Latin American Studies, which engages researchers with our collection items in a process of review and annotation. And Catalina is going to have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the Palabra Archive, which is a wonderful voice resource that layers over those sort of physical collection items, written collection items, the voices of the artists who create them. And this particular project is another project very much like the Palabra Archive, which enables us to work with artists and creators, people who are working in local spaces to bring those spaces to life, and in conversation with resources that we have at the library. Those resources could be materials that have been digitized or materials that are in our libraries, or the really wonderful resources that we have in our staff. I'm very fortunate to be in a management position where we have librarians like Catalina Gomez, like Maria Daniela Thurber, and like Giselle Aviles, who have been working with the creators in the Borderlands Research Initiative to bring forward other resources that can be shared with people all across the country and across the world. And one thing that really sort of strikes me about this process in particular is, for years in Latin American collections, we've been trying to collect materials that would be considered ephemeral and materials that really capture a moment and capture the essence of creation in that moment. And when you look at contemporary art, at the borderlands and in Latin America, there's so much being done in a performance space that is really difficult for archives and libraries to capture. And this project and the work that our librarians have been able to do with all of you is a really important means of acknowledging in a library space the importance of performance in the moment, or the importance of performance in a local space, and trying to capture that so that it can be shared in conversation, let's say 5, 10, 50 years from now. We've always had means for doing that. But in this particular case, the conversation between librarians and the creators themselves is a really important means of being able to share information specifically and sort of distill it, put it in context through the artists themselves. And we feel very fortunate at the library, and specifically in the Hispanic Reading Room in the Latin American, Caribbean, and European division, to be able to work with creators on projects that will share their work in an electronic environment, or in an environment where voice and print and bits, electronic bits, come together. So I'm really grateful to all of you for including us in your work and allowing us to be a partner in the conversation. And it's my pleasure to introduce Catalina Gomez, who serves as curator of the Palabra Archive, among many other things, at the Library of Congress and in the Hispanic Reading Room. And she's going to be able to go into a little bit more depth on the projects that she has been engaging more directly with each of you. So I just express my gratitude, and I hope we can continue to have conversations over a long period of time and across many borders, so that we can share our work together. Thank you all.
Thank you, Suzanne. Hi, everyone. As Rosalía and Suzanne said, I'm Catalina Gomez. I'm a reference librarian and a curator in the Hispanic Reading Room, which is, as you just learned, part of LACE, Latin American, Caribbean, and European Division at the Library of Congress. And I'm really thrilled to be here, and really very excited to be here and discuss what has been so far a very enriching and wonderful experience collaborating with the MexiCali Biennial, together with my colleagues in the reading room, Danny Thurber and Giselle Aviles. It's been a thrill, and for me, very nostalgic, because I was an undergrad at UC San Diego, visual arts, and we did many projects related to border art, and I was involved with Insight in 2005, long time ago, and so all of this really kind of brought me back to some of that great work that you all do in California. So it's just been wonderful. Just reemphasizing what Suzanne just said about how important it is for us as curators and archivists and librarians in an institution like the Library of Congress, that is supposed to be shining light to the story of the entire United States and the world, to be forging these connections with organizations like the MexiCali Biennial, and with all kinds of different communities of practice around the world and around Latin America and around the United States. It's just such an important part of our work, and it helps us just amplify the voices of so many communities, and to show, to be able to showcase this through our resources and our collections. It also really helps us to inform us to make better collection development decisions, because this is how we sometimes get to find out about gaps in our collections, that we're not representing some theme or some community or artists, and this is also has been a really great part of this collaboration, is that we are aiming to make this an opportunity to create a database of all the artists in the biennial, and for us to collaborate with our colleagues in the Prints and Photographs division to hopefully in the upcoming years to collect more and more from these artists at the library. Another great thing, as Suzanne said, is that it connects us to so many more audiences that maybe we wouldn't reach normally at the library. And so creating these projects is just also a great way to connecting with all kinds of audiences. So it's just very valuable in that respect. In regards to connecting with organizations around the US, it's also really important for us because, as you all know, the Latino, Latinx story is very multifaceted, very fragmented. And in order for us to capture the full picture of the story, of the Latino story, is so important for us to do these kinds of partnerships. And the history of California, Baja California, is so unique. So we really couldn't have asked for collaborating with better scholars and artists and historians to be able to tell the story, and also in such an interdisciplinary and artistic way, which I feel like it's even more exciting. So Rosalía went over what our project entails, and I'm also very excited that we still have a lot to do because I'm really enjoying working with all of you, and very, very excited about the Palabra Archive component. I'm the curator of the Palabra Archive, and I can't wait to start identifying poets and writers from this region to record for this collection and to really, really strengthen the representation of from the border literary creators in the archive. So I'm very excited to hear about, hear in more depth and hear from our contributors, go through the 2 research guides that we have created. Just as a kind of a brief overview, I was the editor of the Border Art. So the titles are El Otro Lado, Border Art, Histories of the MexiCali Biennial. That's the research guide that was focused on the border art histories. And it was a great pleasure for me to be the editor and to sort of put all of these pieces together and all of the content that you all provided, and kind of put it all together to be able to publish it. And Danny Thurber was the editor of the other research guide, El Otro Lado, Geographies, Boundaries, and Imaginations of Space. So a shout out to Danny. Also, Danny is our kind of LibGuide guru. LibGuide is the software that we use to create the research guides. And she is actually, we're always going to Danny with a lot of questions as to, how to create better LibGuides. So a great shout out to Danny. And I think I'm just excited that you're all going to hear in more depth about the guides. And I really look forward to seeing, the story map in the future, which is our colleague Giselle Aviles is partnering with you all to produce that. And I can't wait to work in the Palabra Archive component of the project with all of you. And just want to say that it's just been wonderful to work with all of you. I'm very grateful. And I'm also grateful to the poet Rachel Escamilla, who was the person who actually connected me to all of you. And she was someone that I recorded for the archive maybe 5 years ago. And she's a friend of Enid. And she's the person that kind of make the connections. And these people are so important in the work that we do. These people that kind of understand, these people coming together could be great. And she made it happen. So I want to thank her. I want to thank you, Rosalía, Ed, Luis, Enid, Will, Alejandro, everyone who's contributed. It's been great and it's been fun. And I look forward to what we're going to do in the future.
Thank you so much, Suzanne and Catalina. So now we're actually going to hear from several of the co-authors, Will and Alejandro. I'll just kind of start by introducing Will very, very briefly. It's an extensive bio, but I'll get to the meaty bits, which is, and it's very kind of exciting because he was our resident historian on this project. So Will earned his PhD in history at the University of Southern California and is a fellow at the Huntington's Early Modern Studies Institute. His dissertation was titled The Pacific Slope Superstorms and the Big Winter of 1861-1862. And it was the first historical reconstruction of one of the most cataclysmic seasons in North America's past. And the project really fused history, indigenous studies, disaster history, and underscores the significance of atmospheric rivers in the Pacific West. Will has a connection to Santa Cruz, Ma. He was a producer on the film War and the Weather that screened at Santa Cruz, Ma in 2021. And so he helped co-edit the Borderlands Research Guide with Enid Baxter Rice. He authored 2 sections, which is the project that he's going to be speaking about today.
Thank you, Rosalía, and thank you all for coming tonight. And thank you to the whole team, and thank you to Enid, who couldn't be with us tonight, but a big part of pulling us together and a major contributor to this guide. So thank you for that, the extensive bio. I appreciate that. And coming from a history background and coming fresh off my PhD, and as a Western historian, like one of the questions I think that we wrestle with is, the question that this guide I think proposes, or the general thing is, what is a border? What are borderlands? And how do we think about these? And how do we think with them? And so, it's a central question, not only of our work as historians, but I think, the broader kind of academic and non-academic and everyone who's thinking about the borderlands. And of course, we've been moving beyond Frederick Jackson Turner for a while now and trying to kind of get beyond that whole frontier narrative and this kind of singular vision of kind of expansion of the kind of American empire and so forth. And so really, Enid and I, what we really wanted to emphasize, and was much influenced, of course, by others when we had these really good sit-downs, which is to have a really multivocal, multi-perspectival, multi-archival vision. And so, this idea of many histories of one time and many maps of one place, just kind of thinking in multiplicities. And so one of the ways I think in my own work is using waterscapes and using hydrologies to think of borders, particularly the borders between the U.S. and Mexican nation states. So we can think of one set of boundaries, geopolitical ones, but there's all these other ones that kind of overlap and intercede and run up against each other through both space and time. And so there's basically 2 ideas I had in my head, or we had perhaps collectively. And one is, you might remember those anatomical kind of overlay books that would show like skeletal system and the nervous system and the digestive system. And so that was kind of one vision of how to think about this landscape, or these series of landscapes, as they're overlapping geographies through space and time. And the other kind of, I guess, idea is, I think they call it the exquisite corpse game, or, we call it the monster game in elementary school, where you take the construction paper and you fold it into long strips, and one person draws one part of the body, and you pass it on, and the next person draws the next part, and so on. And so it's this collective creation of making a monster in a way, or, stitching together kind of these multiple visions. And so we wanted to have that as the kind of basic idea that undergirded the entire guide. So multiple voices in the contributors, multiple archives in the kind of pieces we're pulling. So it's not just, the kind of traditional historians' pieces of letters and journals and newspapers, but thinking about, the Earth archives, things like, thinking about music, thinking about, geographies of culture, geographies, of radio transmissions. There were so many ideas we had as we were spitballing of how we could think about this space. And so we settled on some very basic ones, thinking about indigenous landscapes and how those are the kind of the most ancient and the kind of longest standing geographies. And on top of that, you can imagine the layering of these old waterscapes that continue to move and shape kind of the region and its peoples. And then as we continue thinking about, change over time in different nation states and different empires as they move and spread. And again, thinking beyond the frontier of Frederick Jackson Turner, thinking about, the Spanish world, the larger kind of Catholic monarchy and that kind of mission system and so forth, thinking about the Mexican Republic, thinking, of course, about Anglo-California, so on and so forth, thinking about that kind of overlapping historical, geopolitical history. And so our guide basically has this series of ways of thinking about these geographies and how they intersect. And I think too often we think of boundaries and borders as lines, as they often are, and ours, unfortunately, is getting hardened, by the electoral cycle, sadly. But also thinking about these as, lines of transmission, not just as, these hard places you can't get through, but of course, places of overlap and connection. And so thinking about, that aspect. And then lastly, I think is kind of the more, and perhaps more powerful stuff that's, even beyond my expertise, and thinking about, not just the Spanish fantasy past, but also in some ways about the kind of settler fantasy past, or in many ways we talk about the American West, but it's also La Frontera, it's the North, it's this different ways of thinking about space and thinking about, the American dream in different contexts from different places. And so really it was just trying to get our arms around those kind of multiple voices, multiple perspectives, multiple histories, and of course, tying into the amazing archives that the Library of Congress has. And so what we have here, in some ways, I look at it now and it almost seems pedestrian, because I think there's so many other ways to think about space. Like we had a lot of ideas that we, I think, shot down early because we thought maybe that was too ambitious, or maybe it was just too, but hearing you guys talk about it, would be neat to look at the geography of, norteños, looking at the geography of specific dance styles, looking at the geography of food cultures. I mean, there's all kinds of ways we could have done this that, so this is a way, maybe a jumping off point, of course, and for, folks to come into this and think creatively, not just about the kind of standard and still very important border questions we have, but also these other ones that can help us expand our kind of mental geographies too. I'm looking forward to your questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Will. So our next speaker is Alejandro Espinoza, who is what I like to call the art historian of Baja California art. He knows everything and everyone. But yeah, Alejandro is an art historian, an art critic, writer, and translator who's based in Mexicali. He is a professor researcher at the Faculty of Arts at the Autonomous University of Baja California. And he also coordinates the Center for Writing and Literary Appreciation at the university. He has published countless books of short stories, including novels that have won the state prize for literature, including Las Visitas, that got the state prize for literature in Baja California in 1997, and La Saga, a philosophical novel, which won the state prize in 2002. And he's also written a large collection of essays and various stories. He has an MA in art history and theory from the University of Chile, and he wrote the introduction to the border art histories of the Mexicali Biennial Guide. So thank you so much, Alejandro, for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Rosalía, Luis, Ed, all the Mexicali Biennial team. I'm gonna apologize in advance because I'm going to try to modulate my English speaking abilities so I can recover them, because I kind of lost them through the years. But I hope that in the process, you will see that I'm will be getting more and more fluent as I go along. At the same time, I would like to concentrate, because of this reason, I would like to concentrate on a sort of brief presentation I did with regards to the history of art at the border and its relation to Mexicali Biennial's practices during the past 15 or so years. So I'm going to share this presentation. I'm going to focus on reading the material so we could so I can share this with you, and also I hope I can fulfill your expectations as to what am I doing here? So here it is. Okay. So here we go. This is aesthetic production as a historical interference, the border art histories guide. I'm gonna kind of revisit some of the introduction that Rosalía made about the border art histories guide. Like it says, the Library Congress Research Guide explores the works of artists, curators, and collectives on both sides of the U.S. Mexico border, focusing on artistic interventions that activate the border itself and make or unmake anew what we traditionally consider a piece of art. And in the process, becoming a sort of historical interference or artistic production along the border between the United States and Mexico, specifically California and Baja California. The research guide offers an overview and expands on 15 years of collaboration between MexiCali Biennial, the organization, and various art and education institutions on both sides of the border through a series of biennials that in their thematic and/or conceptual strategies paralleled and also stimulated contemporary art production in the border region. As a way of establishing a socio-political and historical account of the manner in which art production in Baja California evolved in the past 50 plus years, approximately the span of time we can acknowledge as the history of art in Baja California, I was given the sensible task of writing a brief analysis of these developments, creating a sort of hybridized reflection that links both the social history of the region and the cultural history of its artistic production. A history that began as a continuation of the developments in Mexican modern art history and the series of ruptures, interferences, and disruptions that came forth with the presence of contemporary art idioms and practices. Here I give us an example that at the same time that one of our foundational artists in MexiCali, Carlos Coronado, was inaugurated this mural at Plaza Centenario in MexiCali in 2006, Luis Hernandez painted this mural for the first MexiCali Biennial at Casa de la Tiatina in Mexicali. So my involvement in these developments has been through a series of academic and independent activities that revolve around art writing, art making, teaching, curating, and operating as a sort of cultural agent and consultant with various independent and institutional organizations. During my 20 plus years participating in a long series of events, exhibits, and cultural projects, I've had the privilege of studying both the organic network of artists and cultural promoters in Baja California, as well as the evolution of art practice along the border. This experience has also given me the chance to provide a critical historical perspective regarding aesthetic production in the region, a perspective that has led me to believe that both the social history of the region and its cultural and aesthetic production are somehow linked. For a brief example, the history of art in Baja California and its border region is a history of outcasts and dreamers, an exercise of both the downtrodden and the adventurous, which dwells on the possibility of creating a unique regional imaginary. That is, a worldview that belongs equally to the dreamers, the outcasts, and the adventurers who have populated our cities since their founding. The myth of the pioneer is embedded both in our social history and the characterization of the first artists of the region, all of them coming to the border from different parts of the Mexican Northwest. The first generation of artists can be understood as outcasts, inward-facing and fixated on the 19th century vision of arts for art's sake. Their aesthetic vision belonged to a period in Mexican art history that tried to integrate a modernist approach and a conciliation with our national identity. Pre-Hispanic, colonial, independent, and revolutionary amalgam that built a modern conception of Mexican. Through these developments, artists began to generate a language of representation that the nascent cultural institutions needed to affirm their role in the development of this imaginary. Identity as a commodity export from the central part of our country. Formal in its technical and disciplinary nature, as the rooting began to take place, During the mid-70s and on through the 80s, some of these artists began to develop a certain sensibility regarding our fields of vision and geographical peculiarities. However, the dynamic nature of border culture took hold of the manner in which we perceive, understand, and dwell upon our complex realities. Our social, political, and economic history, the emergence of local icons, legacies, and myths, the recycling of materials, objects, languages, and ways of being, our perceived bilingual nature, all of these phenomena began to be analyzed by future artists within a framework that worked to understand art as something more than just art. Sorry? Oh. To understand art as an engagement with the past and at the same time with the future. Within this history, MexiCali Biennial has taken on an exercise for across-the-board experimentation. This has meant interfering in both aesthetics and society, and from this exercise comes an energy that drives the artists and collectives who dreams of new ways to create and therefore new ways to understand the region. Since the early 70s, artists from the center and northwest of Mexico settled in the cities of Baja California with their empty wallets and baggage of styles weaned on the country's visual modernity. This included, for example, Rubén García Benavides, Álvaro Blancarte, and Carlos Coronado, to name three of various groups of artists. However, as art institutions solidified their place in the region between 2000 and 2010, a school of art appeared, laying the groundwork for a second level of academization. Together with artistic production grounded in traditional techniques and mediums came a reimagining of the art object and its relationship to space. We start to see the inclusion of components and methods tied to a more contemporary vision of artistic practice. Video performance, expanded drawing and graphics, installation art, and conceptual photography opened the way for new artistic languages to emerge. They broke away from master narratives of the border and moved towards a way of creating art that involved processes, as well as making and or unmaking anew what we traditionally considered a piece of art. These new approaches found no place for themselves in the institutions because both the way this art is received and its relationship to the public continued to be difficult to capture or describe neatly. Near the end of the 90s and into the early 21st century, this led to the languages and mediums of contemporary artistic practice finding their own spaces on the margins of the established institutions. In the meantime, I have come to realize that independent of the fact that contemporary art production at the border undergoes a series of transfigurations, institutions start to show more interest in what the newer generations have come to produce. There is a sort of symbiotic relationship between the activities of independent spaces and what institutions and state cultural centers allow to permeate into their halls. Also, this history is also linked to various components that I consider necessary to touch upon. First, the cultural and economic dynamic of the territorial characteristics between border cities. Tijuana, for example, has been able to solidify its art production due to the interest from institutions and private galleries from nearby cities such as San Diego and Los Angeles, while Mexicali has concentrated on establishing a network of collaborative work between local artists and artists from the Imperial Valley region. Number two, there are three main thematic impulses in the visual arts milieu. First, there's a geographical, regarding territories and spaces, both cultural and political. The biographical, as autofictional narratives and testimonial experiences. And the conceptualized language, understood as an embodiment of a resistance or tension in the constitution of our search for meaning in a hybridized and wasn't able to read the last part, I'm sorry. But I'll I'll conclude with the following. In this process, the Mexicali Biennial has forged a community of actants that has strived to explore the depths and complexities of California's historical remains and what history has left behind. By doing this, it has been able to provoke a discussion of our foundational myths, generating a sort of useful disruption in the eyes of the public, which, throughout the biennial's various editions, has had the opportunity to interfere in the historical and social aesthetic fabric of our surroundings. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. That was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we'll just have some short last remarks by Sam White, who's our kind of current research assistant, and then we'll open the floor for questions.
Hi, I'm Sam White. I'm a senior art history major at Pomona College. I'm also the research assistant for the MexiCali Biennial Library of Congress Borderlands Research Initiative. So I'm researching, curating, writing, and conceptualizing the story map for the Land of Milk and Honey. Using this interactive digital storytelling platform, I connect the histories I find in the Library of Congress's archives to those explored by several of the artists in the upcoming exhibition. This summer, I spent 2 weeks in residence at the Library of Congress's Hispanic Reading Room, working with Suzanne and Catalina, as well as Giselle Aviles and Danny Thurber, who I'd like to thank so much for all their help and being so welcoming. And so I was really sifting through archival prints and photographs, working with the Prints and Photographs Division, searching for images of the U.S. Mexico border throughout its history, Mexican migrant labor in the Imperial Valley, and the migration of Black communities to the West Coast during the gold rush of the late 19th century. These archival images relate directly to the contemporary projects being undertaken by artist Ruben Ochoa and the collaborative team of artists Jessica Wimbley and Chris Christian. Commissioned by the Mexicali Biennial, Ruben explores the personal and cultural significance of street food vending, car customization, and individual tamale recipes through his tamalero carts, designed in collaboration with Revolution Carts. Jessica and Chris's video collage, The Unauthorized Photography of California, Volume 2 Field Notes, weaves together histories of the Black Gold Rush, environmental degradation, issues such as housing discrimination in Sacramento, and mythical visions of California within colonial and contemporary imaginaries. So keep an eye out for the story map. We'll be posting information about it on the Mexicali Biennial social media pages. And as Professor Romero previously mentioned, we expect to have it published on the Library of Congress's website in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam, for all of your hard work. And I want to thank all of our presenters, Suzanne, Catalina, Will, Alejandro, Sam, but also all of the co-authors. This is the launch, but this is also just, kind of a way to celebrate all of the amazing work that we did towards the research guide, but also to, I think, kind of share some really kind of exciting developments and progress on the two other projects. So we'd love to open the floor up for questions, comments from our attendees. So until there's kind of a question that comes up, I actually have a question for Suzanne and Catalina, and it has to do with demographics. And, in terms of the audience that we're reaching, is there kind of data, or do we have a sense of who has been, basically engaging, reading the guides?
Thank you for asking that question. I meant to address that data, and I did not. We do have a way to see, generally speaking, through IP addresses where people are coming from to our guides. So we have an overall sort of look at all of the guides, and then we can look at each guide In fact, we can look at each page specifically. And I haven't done that with the El Otro Lado guides quite as much as I would like to in order to share with all of you. But we do see, we can see that that these guides are being utilized across. So it's kind of interesting. We look also at international usage, and the vast majority of our users are coming from the US. And then we have others coming from Spain before other places, which is kind of interesting. The Philippines and Mexico sort of top our charts. So in the case of these guides, you definitely see use sort of concentrated among the group of people that are contributing to those guides. So we see a lot of activity out of California. We see activity out of Arizona and Mexico. But generally speaking, I would say let me get you some more data, and I can share some graphs of that data with everyone, because I do think that it's something that we're paying attention to and that's been important to us in the library. And that is for a long time, you know, with our focus being specifically on the site of Capitol Hill, and then starting to sort of pull out through these electronic resources and frankly through projects like this, right? A kind of community of people who are utilizing library resources from different spaces. We've been paying more attention to how we're engaging people across the country, and focused on the Northeast and the Northwest and the Southeast and the Southwest. And I will say, over the past couple of years, we've seen a lot more use out of the Southwest. And I think that is important for us in the library, because the Southwest and the Southeast were probably the least engaged with library resources historically. So I do need to get you some more exact data, and I promise I'll share that with the whole group.
Thank you so much. We do have one question from our virtual audience. Will the guides be published in Espanol as well? Catalina, I don't know if you can answer that one.
We can. We can, yes.
Okay.
I mean,
next project.
We can translate it, and as a team, and we can definitely publish a Spanish version.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So are there any other questions from our virtual audience? Yeah, so if there's no other questions, I have kind of one quick question for Will and Alejandro. And it's more about kind of making a connection between I think kind of two big ideas that came out in your presentation. So Will, you were really, like the end of your presentation was really kind of issuing a call, right, for researchers, kind of creatives to really develop new ways of thinking about space and contexts and histories at the border. And Alejandro, this kind of concept of the interference, right, and the historical and the sociocultural. And so I'm wondering if, kind of through working on the research guide, if there were, kind of specific areas that kind of stood out as maybe kind of like begging to be, or begging for some light to be shed on them, or were there, kind of maybe specific kind of perspectives, right, that kind of came out of, like this kind of particular project that you would love to, either kind of continue researching, or you think might be, kind of worth, really, really for researchers to really look at.
Alejandro, if you don't mind, I'll just jump in. It was actually one of the comments about the Philippines that's yet another imagined West, another imagined, part of that larger Spanish world, part of that larger American imperial world, part of that. I mean, there's a lot of connections there too. And thinking about, we think about deserts as boundaries, but they're also connective places. And I think we think of oceans as boundaries, but they're also connective places and indigenous spaces. And so that's an interesting thing to think about for our larger. I mean, yeah, I was really inspired by that. So thank you for that.
Well, in my case, I think there are three elements that have to be put on the table. First of all, documentation and archiving. It is one of the most prominent ailments of artistic production in Baja California has been the absence of an archiving system and a documentation that could take into account the evolution of art production in the past 50 years. And also, with that documentation, we can make more sense of a sort of I would call it a taxonomy of visuality in Baja California that could take into account sort of like a sense of the idiosyncrasies and the intellectual, even the spiritual or ideological perceptions that people in Baja California have. And through those two elements, I think the third one will be to learn how to tell the tale. Because I think history has a lot to do with telling a tale, telling a story, not necessarily in a narrative sense, but in the sense that it has to take into account certain elements that have to do with the context, the origins, the trajectories of the people that have been involved in artistic production in Baja California. Most of them have been, a lot of them have been sort of like lost or forgotten because there are all of these inconsistencies. That there's most of these elements are due to problems of infrastructure. Or a solidification of the cultural institutions that could be able to provide these tools or materials for documenting and archiving, which would be, the prominent source for us to build this history. I think that would be it.
Yeah. Well, I would love to end on an inspire. I think that kind of leaves us with, kind of this kernel of inspiration, right? To kind of perhaps kind of create new methods, right? New media and new archives, and kind of which to tell the story from. So if there aren't any other questions from our virtual audience.
I did actually have a thought. We've been doing this thing in my digital humanities program called photogrammetry, and there's some scholars who are taking 3D models of sculptures or ancient artifacts or it's particularly things in Colombia and in South America that are getting removed or moved around, and so they're a way to document them, and then they can be put. I know it sounds weird, but into Unity, into 3D spaces that people can actually walk around in VR. And so I know that might sound a little sci-fi, but for capturing certain things, particularly sculptures or works of art or that are momentary or, ephemeral, that might be something to look into. Just a thought.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Just thinking of sort of the importance of perspective, right? And sort of with an object or with a space, being able to see that object and that space from different perspectives key to really seeing it in multiple dimensions. So yeah, that's a fantastic technology. And I just had a thought also about taxonomies, because I mean, obviously in libraries, taxonomies are sort of our business. And sometimes we've done them in ways that are exclusive. So, and some people might argue that they're necessarily exclusive so that we can organize these millions of things in a way so that they can be found. And it's very interesting because you have to find some sort of pillar or core that multiple things can sort of be organized around. And we do have really wonderful opportunities to identify different cores or different pillars that we might work around, so that we maybe balance some of the taxonomy that we already have. And in that way, I do think we also open a history, right? Or we open our lens for the archive, or our lens for the library, to see other themes, other subjects, other authors that we haven't really engaged historically, because those building blocks that we had for the taxonomy were somewhat limited. So, it's, and these kinds of projects where you sort of speak into places that may not be identifying those pieces of a taxonomy, give us the opportunity to sort of say it and then build out from it. So I love that idea of some new taxonomies.
Yeah. Thanks.
I also wanted to add one small thing, and it was very exciting for me to hear from Will and Alejandro that you guys have kind of a wish list of things to expand on your research, and to invite you guys to see this research guides as something that we can add to, we can add onto them and create new sections for them. So this is possible for us to do. And if you guys want to, add 2 or 3 more sections, as time goes by, and keep reflecting the research that you do in the future, we can do that. So
no, I think I will do that. Yeah.
Great.
Especially regarding the histories of independent spaces in Mexicali, both Mexicali and Tijuana and Ensenada and Tecate, which it's sort of like the alternative history of art production and in Baja California is done precisely at the margins, at these independent spaces.
Great. Yeah, so this is better than a book in a way, because you can add to them. These are digital online resources, so we can easily add to them.
Yes.
Alejandro, that's very exciting to hear. That there's the new research, and that the story map, or that the research guides have this kind of potential to grow and to continue to be shaped. All right, so I think that kind of concludes our panel. Cynthia Hooper was an artist whose work is featured at the Santa Cruz MA currently. Just said, I really love Alejandro's idea of identity as a commodity export in border art production, and she just waved hi.
Sorry?
Oh, it was just a fabulous presentation.
Thanks.
Especially Alejandro's. I mean, it was so great to get a comprehensive art historical understanding of border art. I mean, I've never really been able to sort of get a lecture like that before. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Really, I appreciate it.
Yeah. So thank you so much to all of our panelists, speakers today. Thank you, Suzanne, Catalina, Will, Alejandro, and Sam. And thank you so much to Everett for hosting us tonight, and Santa Cruz Ma.
It is an absolute joy and pleasure. We are so thrilled to hear from all of you tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time in your Thursday evening to share all of this just absolutely generative content. And we're just so excited to continue diving deep into all of this and to see all the different iterations that this exhibition will take and all of the different locations that it will travel to. So thank you again for your time this evening. And just a reminder, I put it in the chat, but the Land of Milk and Honey will be on view at the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History through the end of December. December 31st is the last day. Happy New Year. And it will continue on. So please do keep posted, and thank you so much for sharing your time with us tonight. We will have this video available on the exhibition listing on the exhibition website at Santa Cruz Museum. And so that will be available within the next week or so. So thank you again for all of your time and just incredible work that you've put in through this program, this exhibition, and all of the forthcoming programs. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful night.
You too.
Thank you, Rosalía.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Yes, we'll speak soon.
Okay.
All right.
Have
Happy
a great
holidays.
night. Bye.
Bye.